Good afternoon, my name is Rose Blaze and this is the Live Book Show. Today we have a really interesting content to talk about. It's a collaboration of stories in a book called The Hidden Sussex Anthology. Today I have one of the authors with me here. Good morning, Sally, or good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Rose.
Wonderful. We will come back to Sally because what I'm wanting to do is introduce the anthology because, as I say, it's a collection of stories by a chair lady called Amy Zamapara Solis. And Amy has brought all of these wonderful authors together to tell their stories in the Sussex region. This book is a collaboration of stories where writers of ethnic minorities, the BAM community, Asian community, and ethnic minorities have come together to show diversity in the area of Sussex. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how the book was inspired, and then I'm going to talk a bit about some of the authors. I'm going to mention some of the authors and read some of their stories. So I'll begin by saying that Amy, who is the glue to this, had been inspired having seen Jacaranda is initiative to, and let's get this right, to host the 20 in 2020 initiative. So Jacaranda, which is black publishers, were bringing 20 authors together to publish within the year 2020. Amy was inspired by this and decided, you know what, I'm going to do this in Sussex. I'm going to bring together a collaboration of authors to showcase the diversity in Sussex. So I will start by talking about the inspiration. So she talks about one of the inspirations being a sense of community. So it's about showing the diversity and representation of diversity in the locality. The second inspiration she speaks about was creating a vehicle for social change. It was by way of shifting the perspective of, the black experience in Sussex. And lastly, it was a campaign to improve black representation in publishing, as we know that, this is not the case. They are disproportionately represented. So this was another opportunity for Amy to showcase authors in this area. She speaks about this book being political, a political statement, as it sets out to make a positive difference for people of colour in Sussex. And we are now going to speak about some of the authors. I can say that there are 27 authors represented in this book. And I have selected a few. I'd love to represent them all, and I've read the book and I've really found it interesting. It's really interesting, really insightful in terms of the stories and the experience of the authors. But I'll start with the author, Sushi Chatterjee. And she writes a story called Terracotta Cups. So I'm just going to read that. Just before that, actually, I did want to acknowledge all of the authors in this book. But what I'll do is I'll put it in the credits at the back so that you can see all of the authors who are best represented in this book, okay? As well as the editorial board. I also want to mention them. I want to talk about the artists and the workshop leaders, as well as the committee. So all of these things will be represented in the end because in one way or another, they've all contributed towards the creating of this book. So now I'm going to read Terracotta Cups by Sushi Chatterjee. Terracotta clay, moulded by dead hands, in the shadow of Fort William. You bite the bullet, and bitter blood fills your mouth. Caridoms and ginger, milk from the gods, cinnamon on your tongue, sugar to enthrall you. Finger and thumb marks in clay, for a tainted palate. Freedom is a weapon of war, wrapped in paper cartridges. History is taboo. Where is the ritual? The altered history of a forgotten queen, funerals pray. Independence denied, the black hole of Calcutta revered. Only Irish voices rebel against the profanity of Kipling. In Sussex, a fire rages, high on the downs. Sleeping warriors under a blanket of ash and a stone pillar for their brothers in arms. The men in the turbans bows low. Ain't it half hot, Mum? Screwing the sacred for empire The ending is a partition of souls. Walk ankle deep in blood. Mother Ganga falls from the sky. These are our shared tears. Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Jews and Christians, as we all drink cha from terracotta cups. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. Okay, the second one I wanted to look at was a short written piece by Maggie Harris. So just bear with me. Okay, Maggie calls this piece Pulling into Rye by Train. Ready for the shoes, cobbled streets, Mermaid Street. Lunch at the cheapest pub we can find, somewhere in our consciousness. This is the old England. This was what we'd been promised through movies and postcards, magazines of country life. We staggered on the cobbles, arched our necks at posh old houses, their black and white beams posed. By red telephone boxes, enjoyed the feeling of being somewhere different. These were the days before pound shops instead of collectibles. Attracted ceramics from the pottery, copper and glass and architectural. Salvage we only skimmed. You can't take those in on the train. We never bought much. Through a teacup or two found its way into Mum's purse. Turning up at Christmas with a note in her best convent school writing. You'd like this in Rye, remember? The exceptional was a second-hand shop, vintage now by the windmill. Full of haute couture, we bought bundles then, frocks, bags, shoes. And in the barn by the station, my tie-dye maxi dress watermarked, peppermint green, it would dance at African workshops. Stretch for babies, appear at folk festivals. 30 years later, it's just started to split at the seams. Okay, that was wonderful. Now, I'm not necessarily going to read the next one by Annie Richardson, but just try to talk from memory, you know, my impressions of it. And I'll utilise my notes because there are so many authors here that I'd love to best represent. I can't represent all. Now, Annie was, you know, described herself as mixed heritage, white dad and black mom. Her mother was from the Caribs in the Isles somewhere, and dad was from Sussex. She spoke about the, you know, her mum's journey in Sussex, being, you know, the only black person representing around, and the slurs that she had to face, as our guest here today will describe, Sally will describe. She took an ancestry test and said to Mum, we're African descent, you know, and then the Caribbean, and Mum really wouldn't identify with that. She wouldn't identify with that. And as Annie put it, she described herself as a patchwork quilt. And what she then said was that, you know, with all of the trials and tribulations they experienced, and the times that she had been hurt and upset, she felt that they were picking at the seams of this patch quilt. And she describes it as, you know, whenever there was a hard or testing time, a tribulation, she'd say, you know, they were again picking at the seams of my, you know, patch quilt. And I really loved that description. Yeah, she also spoke about a time when she was, you know, a young child wanting to be white and never saw herself represented, and all of this. So one particular day, you know, her mother took her to London because she wanted, oh no, let me go back a bit. She'd seen Top of the Pops and she loved the dancers' hair, and she said, I want an afro. So Mum took her to London first trip. She describes it as walking into a new world. She walked into the hairdressers for the very first time, and she was looking at the, you know, how incongruent it was, how different, you know, the differentials between a white hairdressers and a black hairdressers. The white hairdressers, she described as a bit more kind of sterile and just neat and tidy. Whereas when her mother opened the door to the black hairdressers in London, to where she'd never been before, she said she just felt heat, smelled chemicals, and thudding reggae music. I loved that. But there was this thing that happened where she sat in the chair, and the lady doing her hair, she said to her, you know, so what are you? And she said, what do you mean? What do you mean, what am I? Because she would assume that being a person of colour and walking into a shop where she saw herself represented, she would blend in. This wasn't the case. And as a result, you know, she was left again querying, who am I? She also then spoke about an incident in the classroom with her teacher who, you know, praised her for her uniqueness in terms of colour. And she said, I can be what I want to be. She said she found herself being very defensive and then feeling silly and embarrassed. And the teacher actually agreeing with her, so she didn't have an argument. I actually agree with you, you're right. You can be unique. You can be who you want to be. And I wanted to ask, and I don't know if you can answer this, Sally, what does druve mean? Is it your druve? Or is it
It's a Sussex word, D-R-U-V.
Yeah.
And the saying goes, apparently Sussex won't be druv.
Oh, right.
Which is won't be pushed into something. So I'm guessing that's where Annie gets it from. Yeah.
Thank you for that, because I was really wondering what that meant. So thank you for explaining that to us and telling us a little bit about your Sussex, culture. It's brilliant. Then I saw another very small writing by a writer called Beb Burchell. And they spoke about a chance encounter, as I've described it here. What are the odds in Sussex that you would pass another couple of, that one black, one white? So, she's holding her partner's hand, and then they suddenly come across a couple who are black and white. And she said, what are the odds? And she said they found themselves staring at each other. So that was all that the story was about. Mm. And I laughed and I thought, that's wonderful, and it's so profound in itself, And then I came across Sunny Singh. Now, this was kind of a really interesting story because, and again, I'm trying to recapture so I can keep a flow going rather than referring to my notes, but Sonny, his story begins where he's stood on the shore, more or less in the water, wading up to maybe his ankles, and is looking out into the sea. I could tell from what he was writing that he was lost, he was displaced. This wasn't a happy person. And then it became apparent it was his wedding day. And an old woman was looking at him, standing, facing the water and thinking, what are you going to do, son? Almost as if to say, don't do it, don't do it. And, and then he turns around and he starts walking away from the beach and up these steps and you can hear the Bangla music and everything going on. And then you understand that he's a groom. Mm. So, he's not happy. He's not happy. And his brother then says to him, and I'm not sure how this worked out, but his brother then said to him at one point, okay, let's get in the car. I'm going to take you up to the actual place where, where you're going to be married. So on the drive, his brother must have known what was happening. His brother obviously knew him and said, stop the car. Got out the car, took a bag, passport, money, said to him, here you are, go. And he said, whoa. His brother said, you don't want to do this, go. He left. Mm-hmm. So this bride was jilted, obviously, but it transpired later on that, so he left the country, he got on a plane at Gatwick and went wherever he needed to be. And 5 years later, his mother dies and thinks she has a heart attack, and he comes back. And you know the relatives. I don't know if you've ever seen what's that film called? Bride and Prejudice. Mm-hmm. Where all the mothers are like chatting and they're the proper, these are paid gossipers, right? And so he comes back to the funeral and there are these women talking about, yes, he's the one that jilted, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, here we go. I've got to put up with the onslaught of this crap. And his father greets him, and so he's almost grateful because of what had happened, gets through the funeral and decides to leave directly afterwards. He books his flight the next day or something and recognises he's running away again. Mm. And so about a year later he returns to Brighton, he rents out a space. I forgot a bit in between and I'm going to go back. So it transpires in the story that at the point of marriage he reminisces and he remembers a young man called Pia that he meets. I don't know if it's on the beach or in town, but he meets a man called Pia, and they hit it off immediately. So much so that the next paragraph read, and we became lovers. And I was, whoa, because it was just a lot all in one go. And I was thinking, really? And like I said, fast forwarding now, he comes back, he moves in to Brighton, so he's there. He's strolling again, and he meets a man called Darrell, I believe it was. And again, they fall in love and get married, and his dad is truly accepting of him. Mm. And I just thought that was such a beautiful story, and I was trying to remember it to kind of condense and retell to you. And I really loved the depth of that story. And at the beginning, I remember him saying, looking in the mirror, before he decides to, even proceeding with this marriage, he's thinking, who am I? I don't recognize the person in the mirror. And at the end of the story, it kind of reads where he says, I'm trying to think, sorry. where I mean, I haven't written it here, but basically where he says, I now know who I am. I now know who the person in the mirror is in the mirror, and I can look at myself and love the person that I am. So I really loved that story. And there was another by an L. Oluwafemi Hughes Jonas. And her story is of a young person who grows up in a Scottish orphanage, a really obscure place. At the age of 14, 15, she's then introduced to the world and begins working in a clothing factory and is confronted with racism. And it was really interesting to read in that respect. So again, there were so many beautiful passages and stories, poems, and things, you know, just writings represented in this book, Sally. And I just loved it. I just loved it. So yours, so yours included.
Thank you.
I loved your story, Sally. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. Because I think through authors, and I really honour authors who come on this show, because they're here to tell a story, they are here to share their experiences, be the teachers, you know, be the ones who, you know, teach us the lessons. So today I'd like us to have a broader conversation, not just about your particular story, but just your experience of growing up in Sussex. You can tell us a bit about your background, your, you know, in terms of your heritage, and we can go from there. Is that okay?
That's fine, yes.
Okay, so let's begin, as I usually do at the beginning of the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show.
Pleasure.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here and to meet you.
Thank you.
It's a great idea, great show.
Thank you.
My name's Sally, Sally Fidel, and I grew up in Crawley in West Sussex, which is in between Gatwick and Brighton, for those people who don't know.
Right.
Growing up when I was born in 1962, the daughter of a Trinidadian father and an English mother.
Right.
And I'll stop about me for a moment because I do want to say how my parents actually met.
No, that's fine. Please do. This is our story together.
It's just such a lovely story because obviously there's so many people came over with the Windrush and that generation, which my father would have been. But he came in 1954 on holiday and got pneumonia because of the climate. And consequently ended up in hospital where my mum was a nurse.
Right.
And that's how they met and fell in love. As my father tells the story, or used to tell the story to people, he jumped up on the bed when she was going to inject him to make him better, and his pyjama trousers fell down. And he said, for your mother, it was love at first sight. But obviously whether that's true or not, we don't know.
I love that.
It was a great source of embarrassment for my mum when we had company. So
she loved telling the story. That is wonderful. Thank you for that, Sally. So let's talk a little bit about your story. What I loved about your story is that, you know, you utilise the analogy of two windmills in your locality, which you evidently grew to love and became a tour guide, I think I understood, for later on.
Right.
Yeah, and the analogy of the black windmill and the white windmill, and your mum, black and white, and utilising that analogy back and forth, because you loved both.
Yes.
You loved the Sussex Downs, you loved the area of the windmills. Was it Hassock?
Yes.
I think it was Hassock. Yeah. And yeah, and you loved your parents. So tell us a little bit about the story.
Well, basically, it came out of several things. Initially, it was my love of windmills, that Sussex came up, and obviously my background, mixed background, and trying to combine the two.
Yeah.
Since I was very little, I think I was probably about 7, I went on a school trip to a windmill and absolutely fell in love.
Yeah, Jack and Jill.
It was kind of, it was actually one at a place called Outwood, the first one I went to, which was a working windmill.
Okay.
Best school trip, because some of the school trips, the museum ones weren't that great, but outdoors I used to like, but the windmill really got me. And I wonder now whether it was because I saw this windmill as a forgotten part of the landscape, kind of neglected.
What's your fascination?
Yeah, I think it's become more that in later life as well, seeing them falling into dereliction and being ignored, and maybe the way that I felt I was ignored at times with the things I was going through. Jack and Jill conveniently are black and white, so it fitted in with the black and white of my parents.
Yeah,
and
the analogies
brother
were
and
fantastic.
I, you know, going. And Jill is a post mill. There's 3 types of mills. There's a smock mill, a post mill, and a tower mill. And Jill is what they call a post mill, and basically turns around on a centre post to face the wind.
Right.
Because of that and the amount of wood involved, there's a creaking sound.
Right,
and my
which
mum,
is notorious, isn't it? I mean,
you can hear it you know, as I
that
talk
loud
about it.
noise.
My mum was crippled with arthritis from quite a young age, since she was 24.
I noted that.
And it kind of reminded me of that, so that was adding to it. The
yeah,
white
exactly.
windmill,
The creaks,
yeah.
the arthritis. There were so many analogies. I absolutely loved it.
So, and it was just truths coming out, really, which we'll talk about more later. But the things about, would my daddy, I always called him daddy, even as a grown-up, would my daddy just one day blow away and blow back to Trinidad? When he went swimming, I mentioned in the story, when we would go to the beach, would he disappear in the water and swim to Trinidad?
Oh, wow.
So there was that kind of thing, and it was trying to illustrate the distance between this part of my life in Sussex, where I was born. I was born in Crawley, raised in Crawley,
Yes,
but there's this other part that's somewhere out there, over the downs, over the ocean, somewhere far away, that was apart. It was also how my father hated. He said he never saw the point, obviously, coming from Trinidad, it's a hot climate, and he comes over here.
I
and
love the language,
people
you did
are,
it so well.
you know, they're wearing blankets to go for a picnic.
That was so funny. You were hilarious in some parts. Sally, you were absolutely, I was screaming.
Yep.
You know, you're all trying to climb up this hill. This was supposed to be such an adventure. And you were all winded by the time you got to the top. And then you so eloquently described Dad in this jacket, and the wind and the cold bellowing, and he was there trying to grab his jacket, and you're thinking, I could tell you were feeling sorry for him, because see, he really wasn't appropriately dressed for the crosswinds up there.
Not at all. And he never got used to it over here at all.
Really?
But he'd always dress. I mean, West Indians have a habit, I know from being older now and mixing more with the West Indian community, of overdressing for occasions.
Yeah.
And so we'd go out for the day, and where you'd see maybe friends' dads would just be in
T-shirts
casual
and jeans.
trousers and stuff. My dad was there in a sports
Suited and
jacket, and
booted.
the shoes were shined to perfection, and all very, very smart. And he looked lovely. I mean, he looked very grand, and I was very proud of him. But he was probably overdressed in the style, but underdressed in terms of, you know, needing a bigger coat.
Yes, I understand.
And he hated it, because he couldn't see the point in going to him. You went to places like Maracas Bay in Trinidad, you sat by the sea in your trunks and drank cold drinks because you were hot. Here you sat with a tartan blanket with a flask of tea.
You captured that so
And
well. Just his
never,
blackness.
Yep.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And it's the way you'd be describing it, because you'd been looking at him. I found there was a lot of humour in your story. I loved your story.
I'm glad that.
And then you became the tour guide, and you were working with school children, and even then you could begin to see the melting pot happening.
Yes.
In terms of people's attitude towards diversity in the community, because you were talking about, you know, the children asking questions that pertain to mixing of cultures and diversity, and then the parents laughing about it and actually talking about it and feeling comfortable with the conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
Which wasn't always the case when you were little.
No.
You know, it was about spot the black man over there.
Yes.
Or, you know, do you know what I mean? And you then went on, at one point you moved away. Mm-hmm. Yeah? And you spoke a little bit about moving away, and then just, what's the word, sort of reminiscing about the windmills, Jack and Jill. And like you said, they were falling into dereliction, but you then went on to talk about the flowers and the beautiful colours, you know, and the variation of colours, and then wondering, will they create a beige one for me? I loved that.
Well, the idea of beige comes from trying, right since I was quite young, to work out what colour I was.
Yeah.
I've kind of faded over the years. Pictures of me when I was little, I was a lot darker, but obviously the climate and everything, I faded. So now it's hard, as I think you yourself were quite surprised when I walked in. It's like my dad's from Trinidad.
Black, did you say?
Yeah, and it's quite a surprise. And then people, again, when you said about Asian, when you look closer, then you can see
your
little
eyes.
bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But it was really unusual back then. You know, there wasn't this mixing or anything. So I was trying to find makeup as a teenager is a nightmare, because they've got it porcelain for the white girls. You could get, I don't even know that you could get dark in terms of black foundation like you can now.
Yes.
But you could get to look like you were suntanned. But there didn't seem to be anything that
Shade for
didn't
you.
leave lines of, you know, marking, if you like, that,
lighter
you know,
and darker
underneath here
orange.
you're beige, you're not like everybody else.
Yeah.
So I kind of tried, the reason I got beige was by mixing what I thought was my dad's colour in crayon and my mum's colour in crayon, and worked out that that's beige. So I kind of say to people now, I identify as beige, hence the beige flower, because that was...
I loved that.
Also, people think of beige as a very what's the word? Kind of wishy-washy,
Yeah, yeah, kind of
dull
nude,
colour.
just, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
you wouldn't
non-discriminate.
choose. Yeah, that's it.
Non-discriminate colour.
You wouldn't choose beige if you
No.
had a choice of vibrant
Yes,
colours,
yes,
and you wouldn't
true.
choose me because
All
I'm
right.
mixed.
You see, doing the analogies
Yeah.
again. I love it.
So that was the kind of thing I was trying to put across. You know, you wouldn't choose me if you knew, or if you dug deeper, which is often the case.
If you knew I was a
Yeah,
mixed person.
and we used to say, the few of us that there were in my generation, that I knew about the Heinz 57.
Yes.
Or the mongrel dog,
Yeah.
that everybody goes and they want all the pedigree puppies and
Yes,
the
this
little
is
ones
it.
left.
Leave the runt behind. Yeah.
And even as a child, and I still do it now, I will always pick, if I have a soft toy or anything I buy, I would always buy the one that had got the wonky eye. I'd insist they got the one with the wonky eye out of the window.
Yeah, the rescuer.
Yeah, it would need...
Because you needed to be rescued sometimes.
Yeah.
From the cruelty of, you know, the external, you know, in terms of people's views and attitudes towards you. So, and again, I want the viewers, you viewers, to go out and get a copy of the anthology. I'm going to hold it up again because it's a beautiful collection of stories, and Sally's story is really touching, really touching. And, you know, Sally and I agreed that we were going to kind of diversify a bit from the story and talk about, you know, life for her now, or even life and her experiences of being a person of, you know, I said mixed race, and Sally said, well, no, Rose, you know, I'd prefer to be portrayed differently. So explain to us, Sally, you know, how ideally you'd like to be seen.
It's a difficult one because you have mixed race, biracial, which all suggests that we're in some way a different race from the white person. So that includes mixed, like myself, or black and Asian communities, that it's a different race that's mixed with maybe a little bit of white somewhere or something else. So I find that not quite right, because there's only one race as far as we know. We haven't discovered any other races yet. We're all part of the human race. So I've always say that I identify as a human being.
Yeah, and I love that.
And whenever I put forms, if you have to fill out those awful forms that ask you,
Yes,
you know, what are you?
What is your,
I always just put other, and then I put human being. Sometimes I put beige human being.
You actually write that?
Yeah, yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Because that's how I identify.
You're being political, Sally.
I am. I know. And I shouldn't be.
Militant.
But it's really important to me because although it's not quite the same now, it's kind of turned around in a way, because young people now, I think, are not knowing, in my experience of talking to people from that sort of background, and not knowing their other side. They don't know, for want of a better word, their black Asian side.
Yes.
They know very little.
Yes.
They know the Western culture.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for them to know about their roots and get in touch with that other part, because it is a part of them, and the older they get, the more it will become apparent. In my day, we learnt, and I've told many, many people this, when we go to the beach in this country, and we'd be told as children to look and squint to the horizon and see if we could see Trinidad, which is a little boot-shaped island, which of course you wouldn't, but as children you're sort of squinting to see where Daddy's country, where Daddy comes from. But I have actually been to Trinidad, and that was amazing.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it. Because coming from rural Sussex to Trinidad, even getting off the plane, blanket of heat. I mean, tell us a little bit about that story, because again, one of the reasons why I just wanted us to go into a broader discussion is because, in my view, Sally, you represent the little child of mixed heritage who are in remote parts of the country and don't see themselves represented, and are looking for direction. They're looking to identify. You know, they're looking, so you would represent that for them. So that's why I'm asking if it's all right for us to extend this conversation to just talk about all things that are real and that matter.
Yes, please do.
Yeah?
I'm happy to do that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So start with your trip to Trinidad. Go on.
It's really great to have the opportunity to do this.
And I'm so glad to have you to be able to do this, because it needs to be a person who's lived the experience to tell the stories. You know, you're what I consider a wounded healer. So it's important that whilst I have you here as a captive audience, I get the opportunity to utilise your experiences for those, you know, the listeners, the readers, to have a really good insight of what life is, you know, what that experience of being a mixed cultured person, a mixed cultured, a mixed race person, I mean, I say race again, a mixed heritage person means to you. So please, start with your trip to Trinidad. Let's do that.
Well, and it was an experience, and it stayed with me. We went, and on our arrival in Piarco Airport, which was very much how you would imagine in all the films with the big tropical fan whirring and things.
Okay.
It's been built up now. It's a lot bigger, obviously, but it was coming down. The rain was coming down, as I put in one of my stories I wrote, like stair rods, those great big lumps. It seemed to be coming down.
And we will talk about what you're doing next afterwards. We've got dessert.
We got dessert, good. And yeah, the rain, I've never seen rain like that in my life, so that was the first thing that
torrential,
hit me.
isn't it? You could literally shower with soap, get your flannel out.
Yeah, it is. It's just rods of it. And I always remember as well looking around for my grandpa and my mum spotting him first. And there just seemed all these people milling around. It was really, really busy, like the kind of busy I'd never seen before, this chatter. So that struck me.
No traffic lights?
No, it was just like everybody, cars going we'd been told, the cars will just drive everywhere.
It is like that.
Don't get in a maxi taxi or you'll fear for your life.
Or you'll fear for the precipice.
Yes.
You go, oh! Don't look. You just keep driving. And it's literally inches from the precipice.
Yes. Yeah, it is. But we drove out to where my grandfather lived, which is this part of Trinidad called Chaguanas, which is where there are a lot of Indian community there. And it happened to be Diwali when we went, so we drove and all the little lights were there, which was absolutely stunning.
Lovely. Wow.
I can remember we all stayed in the same room. It's quite a funny story, really. Me and my mum. My father wasn't there with us that time because he was working. So the three of us, myself and my brother and my mum, went there. And we were all huddled up in the bed together, strange land and everything.
Yes,
heat,
of course,
sort of thing. And then we just drifting off to sleep, and my mum spotted a great big lizard on the wall, the likes of which we'd never seen before. So that unsettled everybody again. But after that initial...
You're kind to put it that way. I was freaking out. I just literally jumped off the bed.
They're huge, aren't they? I know.
Honestly, I felt like I was being accosted. Honestly, they hadn't even moved.
No, they're huge. They really are a sight, aren't they?
They are.
So
it's
that was
very scary.
But the next morning, my mum was suffering as an adult, obviously with jet lag, whereas kids you don't tend to. But my brother was that much younger. He was clinging very much to my mum, whereas I went for a wander around and ended up being in the garden with my grandfather. And that's when it really opened up. I could pick oranges off a tree in the garden. It smelled of oranges and vanilla. I always describe the garden. Yeah, it was really, really lovely.
Completely different cultural experience. And to see yourself represented so many times over.
Yes.
Or kind of blending in, because your look is Asian, kind of Asian white, kind of it is. So, you're in a village with a lot of Asian people, you might just blend.
I did, in the sense as well, and the clothes that I wore were appropriate. I'd have saris and kameez suits.
Wow.
And wear...
Did you wear them in England?
I have done on occasions. Okay. Again, today I was thinking, because it's a sense of pride, but because it's that mixed Indian and Carib. So again, I'm kind of mixed and mixed. So sort of
that would have been
double,
interesting.
Yeah, mixed and mixed, or mixed again. What is it called? Refried chips, I think they call them, don't they?
Refried chips,
and then you refry them. So I'm a refried chip.
That sounds like fried Mars bars. It's really confused.
I'm a refried chip in a kind of way, I suppose. But so I was all right. But what was interesting, which I remember it, but I didn't read too much in again as a child, was that when we walked about, the Indians would bow to my mum and say, "Good morning, nice white lady." So that was a turnaround from my dad being singled out to be, good morning,
and that
nice
old colonialism.
Yeah, very much. So that was something.
But you recognise that?
But I did,
Okay. Can be subtle, but okay, that's great.
I had a...
And how did you feel about that?
I felt it was strange. Okay. And I did feel sorry for my mum.
Did you wonder why that was happening? Or did you know?
I don't know. I got the fact that she stood out and my brother stood out in a way that I didn't.
Right.
And I would spend a lot of time, because I've always sort of bonded with my Trinidad side more. So I would spend more time with my grandfather and my folks than my mum and my brother would.
Right, okay.
They would quite often stay in, because we spent most of the time with my grandpa.
Right.
They'd stay in outside sunbathing,
and
whatever.
And you'd go venturing?
Yeah, and I'd go out to the market when he took the goat to be mated. And I'd go with him and have things like ice cream, and there was soursop ice cream, which I'd never come across before. So, of course, things like that. Yes, I'll try that.
Did you have Guinness then? Guinness?
Sorry? No.
Okay.
No,
They look a bit like lychees. You know what? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've not actually had. But we had, I mean, lovely things like mango. We had the Julie mango, which is the most gorgeous mango, isn't it? Yeah,
Sally,
that's
that
the
is my
nectar.
favourite mango, the Julie mango.
It is.
And I'm so happy to know that I have another ally on side who loves the Julie mango. Everybody loves mango, long and all. Julie's gorgeous.
It is, isn't it?
Beautiful mango.
You're
in, Sally.
I mean, lunch. And rice and pigeon peas, and I remember having crab and callaloo.
Wow,
callaloo. Callaloo was fine, but the crab I didn't want because we actually saw it being killed.
This
with
was
the cutlass.
me with mountain chickens. I didn't realise it was large frogs, did I? I thought it was chicken. So, but the bones looked peculiarly small.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was thinking, Granny, that's frog. I said, what? What? Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to vomit. I said, no, I can't eat, I can't eat. And I really made a fuss about not eating this thing. My twin sister was lapping it up. And I was like, you're eating it. It's oh no. So in that respect, I felt I was probably more kind of lending to my English culture.
Yeah.
I embraced both because I've been going to Dominica from a very small child. But at times I realised how, like I said, I embraced my British culture more.
You do that, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, this is
having the flies come around you and you're trying to eat and you're like swatting flies and go away, go away. My twin sister would eat underneath the house. There'd be dogs walking about and I'd be going, come here, Rose. I had to have a table. But then I thought, you posh git. You know, I used to think that of myself. You know, what's that about? What's all those ears about? Because the cultures are completely different.
They are, yeah.
Completely different. So, okay, so you're now back in the UK. You have this new perspective. You know, how then did it impact your day-to-day life in terms of how you'd relate in your community?
It was my dad, really. If my dad was with me, as I mentioned before we went on air, would come and pick me up from school sometimes on a day off as a treat because I was very much a daddy's girl.
Yes, okay.
And he would stand out because this tall black man that wasn't like any of the other parents. And you think maybe it's because it's my dad, it's the mums that tend to pick up from school, maybe it's that, and you brush it off, but you know. You know because I was avoided by other children, and that came from the parents. I didn't know at the time because I was a child, but in later life I've realised that came from the parents because children are not born with that inherent dislike or keeping away. Children will play with children from anywhere.
That's right. So when did you know you were a child of mixed race? When did you recognise what racism was? You know, unconscious bias or anything of that nature. When did that realisation come to you that actually you were being discriminated against at times purely by the colour of your skin, or them knowing you were of mixed parentage?
Very young, very young. 7, 8, something like that, that I realised. I wouldn't say I realised racism as such, but I realised that we were different.
Right, okay.
I realised that if my friends, and they weren't that many because they weren't allowed to come and play with us for some reason, there'd always be excuses they couldn't come to tea at our house.
Right.
But those that did would come round and you think, oh please, I don't know this, I'm trying to think what the film's called now. Anita and I don't know if you've ever seen that or read the book. And it's about an Indian girl and she becomes friends with one of the white girls and the white girl goes for dinner and she's thinking, please don't be Indian, about her family, please don't have Indian food, have fish fingers and chips or something. And I used to think that, please don't have rice, I really don't want rice, we want fish fingers and crinkle chips and something very normal. I remember kids coming in and saying that our house smelt on a couple of occasions because it smelled of curry.
Of course,
and I found that offensive. So I realised that we were different. And I kind of guessed that's what it was. Because my dad had always said, don't tell people that your father's from Trinidad. There's no need for them to know that. It will spoil. And as I got older with job prospects, etc., if they don't know, then you'll stand a better chance in life if you don't tell them.
So how did you overcome this? Because obviously it's going to impact your self-esteem and your sense of identity. You know, just for the viewers, I mean, we're having a conversation. What would you say to a young person, you know, suffering with this issue at this time? You know, how would you relay how you were able to overcome this?
I read. And it took me a long time to actually find books that were relating to this. The real turning point was a few years ago when I got a book about mixed race. I think it was just called Mixed Race Stories.
Okay.
I'd have to look that up, and actually, because it's a book that I could recommend to other people. And somebody had written, there's all these stories about I had to cope with this kind of racism, that kind of racism. I'm not black enough, I'm not white enough, blah, 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 blah. It went on, but there was one thing that struck me was somebody just put, I wish I'd been aborted.
Wow, that's strong.
And then they went from there forward saying about why they wish they'd been aborted, because it would have stopped all this stuff. And that was when I thought, I really need to do something about this. I really need to get that out there and be proud of it. Because I've tried being black, I've tried being white.
Yeah.
I've played backwards and forwards all my life.
Interesting.
Because there doesn't seem to be a box that says mixed. So I've got to be one or the other. And on different occasions, I've got to play one or the other.
Yeah. It's like that film, Imitation of Love.
Yeah.
You know, and that era in the 30s and 50s where you could pass, as the phrase was, you could pass. And often these individuals had to move away from their families to, you know, indiscriminate places or just different places in order to rid themselves of the past and create a future as a white person, you know, who would obviously have privileges and such like, and hide their identity. But you won't think, you say, no, okay, I've tried to be this, I've tried to be that. So where are you now?
I'm a very proud lady of 58 years old who's...
You look good on 58, actually.
Thank you.
Most women wouldn't disclose, but I'm proud of you for doing so. Free yourself.
I could say I'm 20 and I've had a hard life, which...
I'd be believed.
I'm very proud of both my parents. I've been through phases as well of being proud of one and not so proud of the other.
Passed,
and
just to acknowledge.
So they have, yes. My father passed away in 1990, and I miss, as I say to people, I miss my daddy every day. I really do.
He was such a strong personality.
He was.
In your life.
And although there was my mum, and yes, my mum, I loved her dearly, but my dad I could always go to, and he seemed to have the right, and things he told me years ago, advice he gave me that I think, no, because he was very protecting because of who he was, because of our background, and I think, no, you know, it's in you. You're imagining it, Dad, it's not true.
Yes.
But my background has affected every single one of my relationships.
Right, okay. So, because, you know, as we were speaking before the show about that rich diversity, that rich experience that you have, that only you have, that, you know, a younger generation of what we now call the melting pot can learn from. You effectively are a teacher, a wounded healer. That young people, and even grown-ups now who are still hiding in the bushes, you know, you can say, look, this is how it is for me. Let me help you just by telling my story. I want you to understand the importance of the need for a cultural mix in an area like Sussex. And for us to all be represented there to show off our rich diversity within this community. Hence the anthology, which I'm so happy about. So coming back now, you know, you're an adult now, and like I said, you're neither white nor black. So, just talk to me a little bit more about who you are now and why that could help somebody else to find their identity.
Who I am now is, I don't know how there's a
58-year-old really proud.
Show off. It's finding again, it's back to labels, isn't it? Which I try and steer away from. Having a label in terms of how I see myself. So I think, that would be probably point number one. Don't label yourself. But also don't deny yourself. And don't deny the, I mean, I've spent a lot of my life hiding, as I call it, I put it in a poem as well, hiding rice and peas and calypso in a cupboard.
Oh, lovely, I love that.
When everybody goes out, the boyfriend goes out or whatever it is, out comes the mighty sparrow.
Right.
Or Lord Kitchener.
Wow, Lord Kitchener.
Because I go back that far, because I'm that old.
What, girl? I can relate to you 100%. What? And, yes, that Calypso loveliness.
I had, going slightly off topic, but still related, I had the pleasure of meeting Calypso Rose when she performed.
I remember. Really? In this country? Yes, I know Calypso Rose. I know Calypso Rose.
And that was a real honour. and
Lovely.
to be able to meet one of my heroines, but you can't share that in the way that you could say, oh, I've met Kate Bush, for example, and the white people would be saying, wow.
Because this is about acceptance,
yes,
isn't
it is.
it? The hiding,
yeah.
the non-acknowledgement. This is all about wanting to be accepted, wanting to belong.
It's wanting to share that as well.
Yes.
And I think there's two different things. There's the mixed community that I would like to help. If young people were struggling, I would like to say, don't deny it, because it will just fester inside, and it will become like it did with me in the days when you did hide it more.
Yeah.
I think that racism being non-PC now in some way, some of the comments now, I've argued that sometimes it was better because, for example, my dad would get called a Paki.
Yeah, wow.
And at least then he knew that those people didn't like him. Whereas now he doesn't know because he's not alive. But you don't know now because people can't say that.
Exactly.
So, which is better? It's a difficult one.
It is a difficult one.
You've got to be proud and own your roots. I still don't. I still hide. You know, I still can't have a relationship where I can share. They can share with me. They can give me their stuff, their music, their books, whatever, but they don't want my calypso. They don't want my food, really.
So there's still that denial going on. And this is why, as you were saying, you need to take ownership for who you are. You need to really love self. And it is a journey inwards to love self and really have an appreciation for your background and who you are and who you're becoming. That metamorphosis, that whole journey. Do you know what I mean? So I totally get that. So, okay, so I suppose just wanting to know more about the lessons for young people or people who are still hiding in that, you know, like you said, in that cupboard, you know, and so what was the most freeing experience for you in terms of coming into your own identity? What was the most freeing thing for you?
Writing.
Okay.
I would say it's convenient that we're on a book show, but writing, because you write it down.
Great.
You've got a choice, then you can share it, and I've shared it in communities I wouldn't have thought that I would.
Right.
And that is a freeing thing because that's acknowledging who I am. But it's not. You can kind of hide behind it a bit because it's fiction or it's poetry.
Yes. Wonderful.
So you're edging out.
Yes.
You're not quite out.
Yes.
So I would say writers. I think I put in the note there about.
You did.
Yeah, I would like my readers to write, whatever it is. It's not necessarily to be published. You might not want it to be published or ever get out there, but it will help you. You could set fire to it after, tear it up. But you've written it down, it's come out, it's not in. Once it's already out somewhere, then you can go forward from there.
Totally get that. Totally get that.
We are the forgotten. I think this is the thing I would say. Don't feel alone if you're mixed. We are the forgotten, if you like. If there is another race, we are probably the forgotten race because we're in between no man's land.
Exactly. But you're becoming so much a significant other.
Yes.
And I've said this time and time again. This melting pot is real. You know, every advert I see now, you know, honestly, there's that representation of the diverse community we live in. So we are definitely, you know, the mixed among us are definitely becoming a significant other. And, you know, so we need to embrace that diversity. We do. And you were talking just now about, you know, acceptance, about being freed through writing and developing this. I definitely see you as a teacher. I definitely see you as one who can inspire younger children, enable and empower them. You know, so talking about that, let's move on to what next. What are you doing now?
At the moment, I'm writing a novel, which I've done, I think it's a total of 6 chapters now.
Wow.
Which is actually going to be called Beige.
Right,
so it's going from the beige flowers.
Yeah.
And that charts the struggles. Basically, it's me, but it's obviously fictionalised as well, adding bits from other people's stories they've told me and just invented stuff to make it fictional. Of the struggles between a woman caught between Trinidad and England. Right. And she actually goes, because I was planning to do this a few years ago, my mum, when she was still alive, said she'd help me move out to Trinidad. And that was
literally
my plan.
move to live?
Yep.
Wow.
I'll try that. This hasn't worked. Yep. This hasn't worked, so I'll try that. So that was my plan. I've got family out there, so this was what I thought could be.
At least you're venturing out. I love that.
So... losing my train of thought now.
No, that's fine. I mean, you know, you were talking to us about that journey, that transition from like I said, writing the story for this book.
Oh, the beige,
and
yes,
then,
yeah.
you know, now moving on to the novel Beige, which is like a follow-on.
It is. That's the kind of taster, if you like, the starter, maybe.
Yes,
This
yes.
is going to be a full-length
Wow,
novel, charting the difficulties and the things that she faced when she thought Trinidad was a paradise. Because in my experience, I find the Black and Asian community are more accepting than the white community.
Yes, okay.
And no offence to any of my white friends who
No,
may be
no,
watching this, because
no.
I know some lovely people.
Yes.
But more so, it's the Black and Asian community that are more, because they know what it feels like
it's
to
that
be
psychological throwback, one drop of black blood, you know. So, you know, I think that unconscious bias that rises up in people. Some people know, some people don't know unless they're confronted with the situation where they meet somebody of colour or are somehow involved or exposed. It then comes to the surface, which is an excellent opportunity then for people to explore those feelings, you know, and those prejudices and whatever. So your book will bring out all of these things.
I hope so, I really do, because you do get very tired. That's one thing I did want to say. You get very tired over the years with it, because if I have had a pound for every time somebody has said when I mentioned Trinidad, oh yeah, I listen to reggae, or the same flippant comments,
some throwaway comments
that you get, and that's one of the usual ones. Yeah, I listen to reggae, or I knew somebody who was from Trinidad.
Yes, those kind of phrases. You think, oh.
They don't want to go any further because you think you see that as a conversation opener, but they don't want to go any further than that.
Yes, and there was a mention in the book about throwaway comments about what black people like, what black people don't like, and I was laughing. I thought they were kind of funny. Black people don't go camping.
Yes.
I had to think about that. Do black people go camping? I've never been. No, but I used to go to Soul Weekenders, and we used to go to the little campsite, and I've been tricking up. So, you know, I've done that, but there are no black people in Brighton. And that's so not true.
No, there are a lot of black people in Brighton. Yeah.
Exactly, but then you know these phrases that she brought up to read. There was a few more, but when you actually think about it, you think, well, actually, that's not the case. These are people's preconceived notions about what things are. And if in rural places like Sussex, you're really beginning to see a BAME and as I've said, people of ethnic minorities representing within communities that are rural, what of everywhere else? So we're becoming a community where this needs to be acknowledged. Teachers like yourself need to be speaking that truth to teach the younger people coming up who are of mixed heritage, how they can be at peace and come to a realization about themselves and about what they represent as individuals. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciated having you here today. If people wanted to reach you, is there a particular website where they can reach you? Or?
I haven't got a website at the moment, but I will at some point give you some details that you can put up at the end
we'll
of
put
it
in
or
the
whatever.
credits at the end.
And I'm because I would like people to get in touch if they want to and get a network going.
Yes, definitely. So we have Sally Claire Fidel, and your stories, Tamarick Footprints. Loved that. I loved the book. Thank you for coming on the show, and I'm sure we'll be doing some collaborations in the future. Because I would love to bring that about, to kind of aid your journey and teach me things. So thank you so much, Sally, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Wonderful. Thank you.